Hey guys, tonight we're stepping into a myth that's somehow both ridiculous and disturbing, where a woodland satyr with a magical flute makes the very poor life decision of challenging a god to a music battle. The stakes? Eternal glory. Or, well, eternal suffering. You're about to sit front row at one of the most lopsided talent shows in history. The grass is warm under your feet. The air smells like crushed thyme and sunlight. Overhead, the sky is that lazy kind of blue that almost hums, and beside you, something gold flashes like it's trying a little too hard. It's him. Apollo. Golden boy of Olympus. Sun god. Patron of music, poetry, prophecy, truth, plague, archery, and depending on the source. Slightly unbearable sibling energy. He's leaning against a smooth stone, tuning his lyre like he knows exactly how perfect he looks doing it. You hear a single pluck, soft, rich, sweet. That kind of perfect tone that makes you want to lie down and cry about all your wasted piano lessons. He doesn't even look up. His fingers glide across the strings with ease, confidence radiating off him in sunbeam-sized waves. It's not just music. It's a declaration. Apollo doesn't play, he performs dominion. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And hey, drop your location and local time in the comments. I love knowing where you're all drifting off from. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You start walking. Through gold-dusted hills and oleander groves, you follow the trail of Apollo's music. The ground gets warmer the closer you get, as if his arrogance is literally heating the landscape. He's still plucking casually, each note brighter and more smug than the last. You want to roll your eyes, but there's something hypnotic about it too. Apollo's the type who always wins the group project and then also gets nominated for Prometheus Prom King. His temple's full of laurel wreaths and thank you gifts from mortals, most of whom probably didn't even ask for the visions they received. And don't get him started on prophecy. He practically invented vague foreshadowing. One myth says he once played so beautifully, trees bent toward him. Another claims his music could calm the Furies themselves, those vengeful spirits that even the gods tried to avoid at family dinners. But, historians still argue whether those stories are exaggerated PR from Delphi or just the usual mythological fluff. As you trail him down the hillside, a strange little detail sticks in your mind. Apollo's lyre wasn't just a divine toy, it was custom-made by Hermes when he was literally a baby. Like, stole some cattle, built an instrument out of a turtle shell baby. Somehow, Apollo forgave the theft and liked the instrument enough to keep it forever. Talk about sibling negotiation skills. Apollo hums softly, adding layers to his tune. It's both soothing and sharp, like a lullaby with a legal clause. You half expect a line in the sky to part and reveal a floating Yelp review, 5 stars, made me weep and question my identity. And yet, despite all this glory, something glints behind Apollo's eyes, something competitive, edgy. You get the sense he needs to be the best. Not in a healthy, therapy-recommended way. More like challenge me and I will destroy you metaphorically, musically, and possibly mythologically. You walk beside him for a while, the ground turning to amber underfoot. Every now and then, he tosses a look toward the woods below, where shadows gather between olive trees. He's not smiling now, he knows what's coming, a satyr. Hairy, hooved, horned, and unfortunately musically gifted, Marsyas, the name alone makes Apollo tense, just slightly. You don't see it unless you're really watching, but it's there, a flicker, like a solar flare of insecurity. Marsyas is not a god. He doesn't have a golden chariot or celestial endorsements. He doesn't walk around glowing like a Greek light bulb. What he does have is a flute. Not just any flute. A divine one. You'll get there soon, but just know, it wasn't his idea to stir up drama. At least not initially. Still, Apollo already feels the threat. Not because he thinks Marsyas is better, of course not. But because someone else might think so. And in Olympus, that kind of thing spreads faster than Dionysus at a vineyard. You pause near a spring, dipping your hand into the cool water. It ripples, distorting your reflection. For a moment, you see Apollo not as the confident sun god, but as a performer nervously checking his setlist before a show. He might be immortal, but reputation? That's delicate. Especially when nymphs are involved. They're brutal reviewers. Apollo stops playing and lifts his head. His eyes scan the horizon. You hear something now, just barely, a reedy, fluttering melody drifting from the edge of the trees. It's playful. Unrefined. But charming. The kind of tune that makes children dance and old men weep without knowing why. Apollo's jaw clenches. You've never seen anyone so angry at a flute. He doesn't say anything. He just starts walking faster, golden robes catching in the breeze, sandals gliding over the grass like he's chasing down destiny and intends to win. His fingers twitch near his lyre. You follow, because what else can you do? The wind changes. Warmer now. Carries laughter, carefree, goatish laughter. Somewhere out there, Marsyas plays on, oblivious or maybe defiant, as the god of music himself prepares to turn a harmless contest into a divine drama, and you're right in the middle of it. You step into the tree lean and the light shifts. The sun becomes a bit more filtered, speckling the ground in dappled gold and shade. The air smells greener here, like moss, tree bark, and something faintly fermented, probably from whatever's in the satyr's drinking gourds. There's music in the air, but not the sort you'd hear at a temple or a court performance. This is rougher. Wilder. You feel it in your shoulders before you hear it in your ears. A flute, played too hard, too fast, but with a kind of joy that makes you forgive the imperfections. You push through a thicket and there he is, Marsyas. He's half man, half goat, all chaos. Hair like brambles, body covered in coarse fur. Horns curved back from a forehead lined with wine and mistakes. And that expression? Pure bliss. He's leaning against a tree stump, playing his flute with a sort of reckless abandon that can't be taught, it just is. His hooves tap the ground in rhythm. Birds are chirping in harmony, or maybe they're just confused and trying to keep up. He doesn't notice you at first, too caught up in his own melody. You watch, strangely hypnotized. Marsyas is good. Not Apollo good, no. But there's something about the way he plays, imperfect, but real. You get the feeling he's not showing off. He's just happy. And that might be the most dangerous thing of all in a world where gods rule by intimidation. Historians still argue whether Marsyas was genuinely foolish or just oblivious. Some say he was daring and defiant, a champion of the people, a satyr sticking it to the divine elite. Others suggest he simply found the flute and got swept up in a very unfortunate hobby. Either way, here he is, in all his shaggy glory, making music that echoes off the trees and into legend. Marsyas finally sees you and pauses mid-note. He smiles. Wide. Too wide. His teeth are crooked. His confidence is disproportionate to his situation, but somehow it suits him. Did you like that? He asks, wiping his mouth with the back of his hairy hand. It's new. I call it Ode to Morning Wine. He laughs at his own joke and to be honest, it's kind of catchy. You nod, still processing how someone so rustic could be so magnetic. He stretches, flute tucked under one arm. You know, I didn't always play. Found this beauty in a stream. Just floating there. Like it wanted to be found. He winks at you. Athena's, they say. She tossed it away. Something about her face puffing up like a goat's bladder when she played. Me, I don't mind puffing up. Comes with the satyr territory. You try to picture Athena, goddess of wisdom and war strategy, flouncing off in a huff because she didn't like her cheeks in the mirror. Sounds petty. Sounds accurate. Some versions of the myth say she cursed the flute as she threw it. Others claim she simply thought it unworthy of her and moved on to more dignified hobbies like spinning fate or making mortals feel inadequate. But the instrument? It was still divine. Which made Marsyas, by sheer chance or terrible luck, something special now. A satyr with a god-crafted flute is like giving a raccoon a chainsaw and watching what happens. You sit on a rock while Marsyas rambles. He's talking about music, sure, but also about wine, nymphs, dancing, the moon, and how unfair it is that humans get all the festivals. His energy is infectious, in a way that makes you forget, just for a moment, that this isn't going to end well. Then, without warning, the music stops, the temperature drops half a degree, and there's a golden shimmer at the edge of the trees. Apollo has arrived. He doesn't say anything at first. He just exists. Radiantly. Like someone who knows they were voted most likely to smite a mortal in high school and is still coasting on that reputation. His lyre rests under one arm, polished and glowing. His gaze is cool. Too cool. Marsyas turns, sees him, and you swear you hear his tail swish nervously. Just once, ah. Lord Apollo, he says, trying to bow and play it casual at the same time. It doesn't work. His flute slips from under his arm and clatters to the dirt. Apollo's eyes don't blink. You've been playing quite a bit, I hear, he says, voice as smooth as olive oil over a dagger. Marsyas shrugs. It's just music. Anyone can play music. That's the moment. That's the sentence. The one where you feel the air tighten, like the trees are holding their breath. Apollo steps forward. Anyone? He echoes. Not angry. Not yet. Just interested. Marsyas nods, only realizing now that he has no exit strategy. Sure. Music's for everyone, isn't it? Apollo tilts his head, one golden curl falling neatly over his forehead. Then perhaps you'd like to test that theory. You almost say no, absolutely not, bad idea, please don't, but you're not here to intervene. You're just here to watch the myth unfold. Like everyone else, the breeze rustles. Marsyas hesitates. He glances at his flute, then at the god. Maybe it's pride. Maybe it's the wine. Maybe he just doesn't want to back down in front of an audience. Either way, he says it, fine. A contest. You hear it before you see it, the forest reacting. A murmur through the trees. Nymphs emerging from bark. Fawns peeking around branches. A dryad yawns as she materializes from a log. Word travels fast when a satyr dares to challenge a god. Apollo smiles, but it's not a friendly smile. It's the kind of smile people make before delivering an insult wrapped in a compliment. He lifts his lyre and strums a single chord. The birds stop singing. Somewhere, a deer faints. Marsyas looks at his flute, and then at the crowd. All right, he says, lifting his instrument. Let's see who can really make music. And just like that, the fate of one very hairy satyr is sealed. The forest clears a bit more as creatures of myth shuffle in, gathering for what promises to be a very lopsided concert. You're now sitting near the edge of a naturally formed amphitheater, ferns trampled into seats, mushrooms forming makeshift cushions, and a rock that suspiciously resembles a very bored-looking fawn. Everyone's whispering, though no one really wants to say what they're thinking, that Marsyas has just made the most spectacular mistake of his shaggy little life. You glance over at the satyr. He's adjusting. Tuning his flute. Humming. Flexing his fingers like he knows what he's doing. And maybe he does. The confidence hasn't left him yet. There's still a faint grin on his lips. Like he believes, really believes, he might just pull this off. Poor guy. Apollo, meanwhile, doesn't look the least bit concerned. He's standing in a patch of filtered sunlight that conveniently makes his hair look shinier, his robes more golden, his smugness more professionally lit. He isn't warming up. He doesn't need to. His lyre glows faintly in his hands, the strings humming with a soft, divine tension. He plucks one idle note, just to remind everyone, without saying a word, that he's not just here to play music. He is music, but you're not here for Apollo's power flex. You're here for the origin of the story. And that all comes back to the flute Marsyas found. The tale goes like this: once upon a very judgmental day, Athena, the goddess of strategy, wisdom, and stone-cold dignity, decided to invent the flute. Because, why not? She carved it from the bones of a stag and blew into it, producing a sound so mournful it made the owls in her temple pause mid-hoot. At first, she was pleased. The music was haunting and unique. But then she caught a glimpse of herself in a reflective pond. And oh no, there it was. Her cheeks puffed out, her face contorted, her dignity compromised. She didn't look like a battle goddess. She looked like she'd lost a bar fight with a bagpipe. Mortified, she hurled the flute to the ground and cursed it, declaring it unfit for divine lips. Some say she ordered it destroyed. Others say it simply rolled into a stream and was forgotten. But either way, it ended up in the hands, or rather hooves, of Marsyas, and this is where it gets weird. Despite Athena's curse, the flute still worked. In fact, it worked brilliantly. Marsyas picked it up, blew into it, and out came notes that shouldn't have been possible. Not with mortal lungs. Not with mortal fingers. Historians still argue whether the flute retained divine power or if Marsyas, despite all goatman odds, was just genuinely gifted. Some point to early Anatolian folk music as inspiration for the myth. Others see echoes of a much older tradition of mortals competing with gods, usually to their detriment. But back in the glade, Marsyas doesn't care about origin theories. He's too busy feeling like a rock star. He raises the flute and takes a breath. The forest holds still, and then, he plays. The sound is strange. Not polished. Not ethereal. But it's alive. It jumps and twists and teases the air like a mischievous sprite. It makes squirrels dance. It makes the nymphs sway. Even a few of Apollo's more stoic supporters furrow their brows like, "Wait, this is actually kind of good." Marsyas plays faster. His fingers blur. The flute whistles and trills and dives into melodies no one knew existed. He's sweating, yes. He's turning slightly pink. But he's owning it. You can't help but tap your toe. Against all odds, the satyr's making magic, and for a split second, you think, he might actually have a chance. Then you turn to Apollo. He's watching. Calm. Silent. But something's shifting behind his golden gaze. His jaw tightens. Not enough to look angry, just enough to look ready. When Marsyas finishes, there's applause. Real applause. A group of dryads even whistle with their fingers, which is extra impressive when you consider that half of them don't have fingers in the traditional sense. Marsyas bows, panting, beaming, high on musical adrenaline, and then, Apollo steps forward. He doesn't speak. He just begins. One hand strums. One note floats. And just like that, everything else fades. It's not a melody you hear so much as feel. Like the air itself is singing. The trees stop rustling. The clouds drift slower. Even the bees fall silent mid-flight, suspended by the sheer gravity of sound. It's delicate, sure, but precise. Every note lands exactly where it needs to, like stars falling into a constellation. Apollo plays with a god's awareness of structure, harmony, emotion. The music doesn't just entertain. It commands. It teaches, and that's the difference. Marsyas plays like someone who loves the sound. Apollo plays like someone who understands what sound is made of. A hush falls over the clearing. The last note stretches and curls through the trees, fading like heat from a dying fire. Marsyas swallows hard, he knows, and yet, he smiles, because sometimes, it's not about winning. Sometimes it's about being brave enough, or foolish enough, to play your heart out in front of a god. You sit back, the forest whispering again. The first round is done. The audience murmurs. The judges, Nymphs, spirits, and woodland elders exchange glances. But no one says it out loud, not yet, that'll come next. The forest breathes in unison with the tension now curling around every root and branch. No one moves. Not really. A squirrel sneezes, but even that feels apologetic. You shift your weight slightly on your fern seat, trying not to crunch anything that might draw attention. The moment hangs. Marsyas, still gripping his flute, steps back and rubs his wrist. You can tell he's trying to read the crowd, but gods and spirits are hard to impress. They don't cheer like mortals do. They nod. They blink slowly. Occasionally, they dissolve into fog. It's very hard to get a standing ovation from something that doesn't have legs. A cluster of judges has formed, a trio of river nymphs with hair like flowing ivy. An old forest spirit in the shape of a tree stump with mossy eyebrows, and a satyr so ancient his beard has turned to lichen. They're whispering in musical tones, trying to look impartial, but you can see it in their eyes. Apollo has the edge. Of course he does. He's the god of music. This is his turf. Still, they hesitate, because Marsyas, bless him, played well. Not divine, no. But he made people feel something, and that's not nothing. Round 2, Apollo says, and his voice hums like it's being projected through a cloud of harp strings. Let's raise the stakes. Marsyas frowns. Stakes? Apollo gestures with one long, sunlit arm. We'll play upside down. You blink. Wait. What? Upside down, Apollo repeats, like this is perfectly normal. Whoever can still perform flawlessly in that position will prove true mastery. Marsyas hesitates, mouth slightly open, like he's buffering, because here's the trick, you can't play a flute upside down. Not really. The breath control alone is nearly impossible. But a lyre? A lyre you can still pluck even if you're hanging by your ankles like a ripe figure. It's a trap. Elegant. Beautiful. Deadly, Marsyas knows it. You can see the twitch in his tail. But backing out would be worse. In front of all these witnesses? No satyr would ever take him seriously again. He'd have to go live under a mossy rock and tell stories to salamanders. So, with the confidence of someone who has not yet Googled how long can a satyr hang upside down before fainting, Marsyas agrees. They string him up first. It's not violent, yet. Just a vine looped around his ankles, hoisting him gently from a sturdy tree branch. His hair flops downward. His flute dangles from a string around his neck. He's red-faced but grinning, probably pretending it's some kind of avant-garde performance art. You half expect him to start beatboxing just to cover the awkwardness. Instead, he brings the flute to his lips and starts to play. The first note cracks. The second is a wheeze. But the third? The third catches. It's not beautiful. Not like before. But it's clever. He uses the hiccups and gasps to make something new. He turns awkwardness into rhythm. He makes the absurdity part of the show. A few nymphs giggle. The dryads sway again. Even the grumpy lichenbeard satyr claps once, begrudgingly. Historians still argue whether Marsyas invented jazz right there in that forest clearing, but one thing's clear, he's adapting. Apollo watches with an unreadable expression. You wonder if, somewhere deep in his golden, divine ego, he's almost impressed? Nah. Probably not. Then it's Apollo's turn. He doesn't need to be hoisted. He just floats. Gravity decides he's optional today. His feet leave the ground. His robes stay immaculate. His lyre settles against his chest like it's grown there. He flips upside down like he's practicing celestial yoga. And then he begins. The music is flawless. Again, of course it is. It's not just sound anymore, it's architecture. You can see it, like glowing shapes hovering above the glade. Harmonies ripple outward like pebbles dropped in divine water. Even the insects stop buzzing. A snail near your foot lifts its eye stalks in silent awe, and there, hanging upside down, Apollo plays a melody that somehow includes everything Marsyas tried to express. But more controlled. More polished. Less joyful, maybe. But undeniably superior. Marsyas, still dangling and gasping, hears it too. You can see the realization set in like a slow sunrise. The grin fades. His hands drop a little. The flute falls against his chest with a soft thunk. He knows, and this time, so does everyone else, there's no need for a judge's deliberation. The glade itself seems to murmur the verdict. Even the vines go slack, as if to release Marsyas from the humiliating pose. Now that it's all over, Apollo lowers gracefully to the ground and reclaims his place at the center. He doesn't gloat. He doesn't have to. Marsyas lands awkwardly. His knees buckle. He brushes leaves out of his hair and mutters something that sounds like worth a shot. The old stump spirit clears his throat, a sound like acorns rolling in a jar. The god wins, he says simply, and just like that, the music contest is over. You glance around. Some of the forest audience is already beginning to drift back into the trees. The dryads vanish with soft laughs. A few fauns resume a dice game that was rudely interrupted by all the divine tension, but the air hasn't relaxed. Not yet, because you know what comes next, the punishment, and unlike the contest, that's not going to be gentle. You stay very still, the way you do when a storm's on the horizon but hasn't broken yet. The contest is over. The notes have faded. The lyre strings rest. And Marsyas? Marsyas is standing awkwardly, rubbing the back of his neck, trying to pretend like he hasn't just become a cautionary tale in real time. He knows, somewhere in his woolly little heart, that the worst hasn't come yet, and you know it, too, because Apollo hasn't left. He's not packing up his lyre. He's not ascending into a golden beam of light or disappearing into a dramatic puff of rose-scented smoke. No, he's just standing there, perfectly still, head tilted ever so slightly. Like he's waiting for something, you. Or rather, the moment. This is where myth tilts. Where stories become slippery. Because now we enter the part scholars don't agree on, where legend breaks into shards, each sharper than the last. Some versions say Marsyas begged for mercy, others say he smiled to the end, brave or foolish or both, but one detail never changes: Apollo flays him, yes, flays. As in, removes his skin. Like a very intense spa treatment gone irreversibly wrong, historians still argue whether this brutal punishment was symbolic, a metaphor for arrogance, for hubris, for trying to wear a power that doesn't belong to you, or whether it's just what happens when gods have too much ego and not enough therapy. You stare at Apollo now, unable to look away. There's no joy in his face. No rage either. That's the worst part. He's serene. Like this is all part of the performance. Act 1, the music. Act 2, the justice. Curtain, he steps toward Marsyas, and the forest freezes, literally. The breeze halts mid-whisper. Leaves hang mid-fall. A bird suspended mid-wing beat. Even time itself takes a deep, bracing breath. Marsyas raises his hands. Not pleading. Not resisting. Just accepting. Maybe he knew this was coming. Maybe every note he played had a little goodbye baked into it. You want to look away, you really do, but you also want to understand, and that's when Apollo lifts his hand, not with a knife. Not with a blade, but with a gesture so elegant it looks choreographed. And the magic does the rest. You don't see it, exactly. The stories always say flaying, but maybe that's just how ancient minds understood divine unraveling. Because what you do see is Marsyas beginning to unbecome, first his music, forgotten. Then his smile, reversed. Then his skin, yes, it does part, but not with blood or gore. It's like threads loosening. Like he's being returned to the loom of the universe, one strand at a time, no screams, just wind, picking up again, curling through the clearing like an old song remembered, and then, silence. Marsyas is gone, in his place, a red-stained rock. The ancient sources always mention it. A stone, turned crimson by the blood, or essence, or story, of the satyr who dared to challenge a god. You blink, trying to ground yourself. That rock is still visible in Phrygia, some say, where the river Marsyas flows. A real place. A real stream. Whether the myth shaped the land or the land shaped the myth, no one knows, but the red stone remains. Apollo turns, not toward the crowd, what's left of it, but toward you, because yes, you're still here, still watching, still trying to understand why this had to happen, and in that moment, something strange glimmers in Apollo's eyes. Not regret. Not triumph, recognition, like he knows that you, too, are someone who listens. Someone who wonders. Someone who maybe, just maybe, would have picked up that cursed flute. You're not sure whether to be honored or terrified, so instead, you do what any reasonable person would do in the face of cosmic scrutiny. You lie very still and pretend to be a fern. Apollo walks past, the glade exhales. The creatures begin to move again. A single bird resumes its interrupted tweet. A breeze brushes your cheek, soft and cool, like a page turning, and just like that, the god of music is gone. The satyrs shuffle out, quieter now. The nymphs return to their trees. The judges disperse without a word, as if afraid their voices might summon him back. You finally exhale, your lungs trembling a bit. Because it's not just that Marsyas lost, it's that he never could have won. This wasn't a fair fight. It was a lesson. A reminder, gods don't like being challenged, but mortals never stop trying, and that might be the most dangerous music of all. You linger in the glade longer than you should. There's no ceremony, no final applause. The audience dissolves like mist, returning to their trees and caves and underwater grottos, perhaps hoping they can scrub the memory clean by pretending it was just another forest fever dream. But you? You're still crouched in a patch of clover, blinking slowly, trying to process the quiet after the divine storm, and that red stone, it hasn't moved. Won't ever move. It pulses faintly in the twilight, as if remembering the music, the defiance, and the punishment. You imagine, maybe too vividly, the warmth still radiating from it, not fire, not life, but story. A satyr's last encore, now fossilized into myth. You finally rise, bones cracking like dry twigs, and make your way down a mossy path that probably wasn't there earlier. You don't know where you're going. The forest rearranges itself around grief. Or maybe you're just dazed. Honestly, same result, and that's when the whispers start, not voices. Not really. Just rustling leaves, trickling water, the occasional acorn plopping dramatically in the distance. But they carry meaning. The forest remembers what you saw. What you felt. And it wants to talk. You hear it in the crunch of branches underfoot. Other mortals have challenged gods before. Always ends badly. There's a long, crunchy tradition of it. Think of Arachne, who thought she could outweave Athena. Or Niobe, who boasted of her children to Leto, and got every one of them skewered like mythical kebabs. Or poor Icarus, who aimed a little too high and got flambéed mid-flight. And then there's Marsyas, the musician who didn't steal fire, or boast, or fly. He just played, and for that, he was skinned. You walk in silence, heart still rattling a bit like a tambourine in a gust. Eventually, you reach the banks of a river. Not wide, but fast. It chatters over rocks with gossiping enthusiasm. You don't need a name to know it, the river Marsyas. It winds through this part of ancient Phrygia like a thread through fabric. Real enough to touch. Cold enough to sting. You kneel and dip your fingers in. Half expecting to hear faint flute notes drifting through the water, you don't. But you imagine them anyway. Local legends say the river sprang from Marsyas' tears, or maybe his blood. Honestly, sources weren't big on emotional nuance back then. Either way, the river became sacred. And weirdly musical. Shepherds claimed they could hear harmonies in its current. Travelers swore it babbled in 7/4 time. A poet once described it as humming itself into memory. You close your eyes, and for a moment, you hear it too, not clearly. Not like a concert. More like echoes. Broken rhythms. Fragments of a song once played in defiance. The kind of tune you hum when you don't know all the words. But feel the shape of them anyway. That's when you notice a figure sitting on a boulder upstream, not a god. Not even a spirit. Just a man. Robes soaked. Feet dangling in the current. He has a lyre beside him, but he's not playing it. Just staring into the flow like it owes him answers. You wander closer. He doesn't look up. Instead, he speaks, voice barely above the water's whisper. He was better than they say, you know. You pause, unsure whether to answer. But you do. Marsyas? A small nod. He made people feel things. Not many musicians can say that. You sit beside him, watching the same rippling water. He continues, soft as moss. I was there. Back row. Didn't clap. Didn't boo either. Just listened. You glance sideways. His eyes are rimmed red, not from tears, but from sleeplessness. This is someone who's carried the performance in his memory like a pocket-sized ghost. Do you think he knew what would happen? You ask, another pause, then, of course. That's why it mattered. That's the strange thing about myths. They're full of characters who step forward knowing they'll lose. Knowing they'll hurt. But still, they do it. Because something about the risk, the absurdity of it, sings. You watch the river some more. It shimmers in the dying light. For a heartbeat, you think you see a shape beneath the surface, horns, hooves, a face half-formed from bubbles. But it fades too quickly to name. People always talk about Apollo's cruelty, the man beside you says. But maybe it wasn't just punishment. Maybe it was claiming. You frown. Claiming what? He shrugs. The music. The defiance. The pain. Gods collect stories. And Marsyas became a great one. You chew that over for a while. It tastes like salt and ash. The man picks up his lyre, finally. But he doesn't play. He just fingers the strings absently, as if remembering what notes could have been. Then he stands, nods once, and melts back into the trees like an idea that's done being thought about. You stay there alone, the river murmurs on, and for a long time, you just sit, letting the sounds wash through you. There's something deeply unsettling about watching someone pay so dearly for daring to create. But there's also something brave. Marsyas wasn't perfect. But he showed up. He dared. And maybe that's why we still remember, because history forgets caution. But it chants defiance, even in lullabies, even in dreams, especially in dreams. You rise slowly from the riverbank, joints creaking in protest, like ancient doors opening onto older truths. The sun is beginning to dip low now, spilling its last light through the trees in long, theatrical beams. Very Greek. Very mythological. You expect a chorus of dryads to materialize and start harmonizing about moral consequences any minute, but they don't. Instead, your path shifts again, and you find yourself walking uphill, along a winding trail marked not by footprints but by intonation, the way the forest hums just slightly differently with each step, guiding you not toward clarity, but into the next verse of this unfinishable song. And there, on the slope, you find it. A shrine, more rubble than ruin. More suggestion than structure. A collapsed circle of white stone, its surface etched with faded patterns of vines, flutes, and, yes, lyres. In the center, a stump, not of a tree, but of an altar. Burnt black in some places. Smoothed by generations of kneeling in others, you approach. Shrines like these once dotted the Greek landscape, each one a kind of hotline to the divine. But this one? This one is different. Not dedicated to Zeus, or Hera, or even Apollo himself, it's for Marsyas, and that's unexpected, because who builds a shrine to a failure, and yet here it stands. Quiet. Hidden. Loved, you reach out, touch the stone. It's cool. Firm, reassuring in a way that feels personal. Like Marsyas never wanted to be a martyr, but enough people whispered his name into sleep that the stones remembered anyway. You sit beside the altar. And think, this is where things start to get complicated, because depending on who you ask, Marsyas wasn't just some rustic fool with a flute and poor judgment. Some ancient sources claim he was once a king. Not of a palace, but of woodland things, animals, springs, untamed joy. Others say he was the patron of a different kind of music, one that belonged to earth, not Olympus. Grit, not gold. Rhythm, not harmony. In that reading, the contest wasn't about skill, it was about power. About who gets to define beauty. About whether music belongs only to the elite, or also to the muddy, messy, merrymakers who dance offbeat and sing too loud. Historians still argue whether Marsyas' story reflects a deeper cultural tension, between high art and folk expression, between Apollonian order and Dionysian chaos. Between curated perfection and emotional truth. You lean your head back, watching the sky turn lavender, and then you remember something odd, the rules of the contest. You weren't imagining it, the original challenge was about playing music, but Apollo changed the rules halfway through. He demanded they play their instruments upside down. Seems like a small detail. Right? But that's the thing, Apollo could, because his lyre didn't rely on breath. Marsyas Alas did. And when you're blowing into twin pipes, flipping them upside down turns your lungs into origami. It's impossible, so of course he failed. He was set up. That's not just divine judgment. That's divine sabotage. With a very smug grin, you lie back in the grass, angry on behalf of a creature who probably smelled like mushrooms and never asked for your pity, because even in myth, injustice feels too familiar. And here's another thing, some scholars argue that Marsyas didn't actually die in the story's earliest versions. That maybe the flaying came later, added for drama, or to make the lesson clearer. That in some primitive version, he merely lost, sulked back to the woods, and spent the rest of his days playing sorrowful tunes under a waterfall. It's comforting, in a way. Like imagining that maybe he went on to mentor panthers or compose dirges for fallen leaves. Maybe the river that bears his name wasn't formed from blood, but from decades of melancholy melodies leaking into the rocks, and you'd believe it, if not for that red stone. Still, the idea lingers. What if Marsyas' story wasn't just a cautionary tale? What if it was a protest anthem in disguise? He wasn't the first to challenge the rules, and he wouldn't be the last. You glance at the altar again. Someone left an offering recently, a crude little flute. Carved from reed, tied with twine. Probably a child's. Or a dreamer's. Either way, it rests there like a vote. A soft rebellion. You smile, unexpectedly, because the more you think about it, the more it makes sense. People don't worship perfection. Not really. Not deep down. They admire it. Envy it, maybe. But they don't love it. What they love, truly, madly, irrationally, are the ones who try anyway, the off-key. The outmatched. The brave, dumb, passionate challengers who step forward knowing they're going to lose and do it anyway, because something about that makes the world sing, even if the ending is tragic. Especially if the ending is tragic. You watch the stars appear one by one. Each one is a story someone refused to forget, and you realize that Marsyas isn't just a satyr with a bad plan and good lungs. He's a mirror, for every artist. Every rebel. Every human who's ever looked at a system built by gods and whispered, "Let me try." Even when it ends in silence, even when it ends in skin, even then, people keep picking up flutes. You don't notice when the grass around the shrine softens into moss, or when the moss turns to mist underfoot, but suddenly, you're no longer sitting beside the altar, you're walking again, somewhere between memory and metaphor. It's darker now, and the trees grow taller, gnarled like arthritic fingers. The wind hums low notes, like an orchestra warming up underground. You can't see the moon, but you feel it, somewhere behind you, like a spotlight you can't turn toward, and then, laughter, high-pitched, wild, echoing strangely, as if multiple voices overlap. You follow it, because of course you do, and soon emerge into another clearing. But this one isn't solemn or haunted. It's alive, a revel is in full swing, and no, not the dignified kind. Not even close. This is the kind of party that would get shut down by every Olympian neighborhood council before midnight. Satyrs are cartwheeling through grapevines. Maenads whirl like tops, their hair full of ivy. Someone is riding a donkey backwards, just because. There's wine. There's fire. There's definitely nudity, but tastefully off-screen. Don't worry, this is Dionysus's crowd, and they are thriving. One satyr notices you, gives a grin that shows far too many teeth, and tosses you a cup. It's carved from a gourd and filled with something that tastes like lightning and fermented peaches. You sip. Instantly. Your pulse loosens its tie and unbuttons a few top beats. You're not here to judge. You're here to feel, and they're feeling everything, because this isn't just a party. It's a philosophy. You find yourself swaying to a rhythm that doesn't seem to come from anywhere specific. Just the collective pulse of every creature here. It's chaotic, uncontrolled, messy, and weirdly transcendent. This is music without rehearsal, sound without ego, emotion as percussion, and somewhere in that swirl, you begin to understand what Marsyas represented, not just as a musician, but as an idea. He wasn't trying to become Apollo, he was trying to say, I exist too. And that message, raw, unfiltered, a little drunk, resonates through this forest like a bassline. You find a rock to sit on and take in the scene. It's oddly comforting, this abandon. Not because it makes sense, but because it refuses to. These creatures don't need approval. They don't crave divine validation. They are their own gods for the night, and for some of them, maybe that's enough. Across the clearing, you see a figure that stands slightly apart. He's older than the others, slightly more upright, though his horns are still tipped with grape juice. He's got an aulos in one hand, and he's not playing it. Just twirling it slowly, like a memory between fingers. You approach. Because again, of course you do. He eyes you with suspicion, then amusement, then something like recognition. You've been to the shrine, he says, not a question. You nod, he nods back. Then you know. You wait. Let the silence stretch. Eventually, he continues, they call it a contest. Like there were rules. Like anyone wins when a god gets insulted. You sit beside him, noticing the way his hands tremble, not from age, but from something older than age. Reverence? Rage? He exhales. They say Dionysus tried to intervene. You blink. That part wasn't in the textbook, he shrugs. Not directly. But there are stories. That he sent a wine dream to Apollo the night before. Tried to soften him. Or that he challenged the flaying with a riddle Apollo couldn't answer. But Apollo just ignored him. Historians still argue whether Dionysus's cult really viewed Marsyas as a martyr. Some say he was just another myth in their chaotic chorus. Others claim his music was part of the original rites, performed in caves, echoing off stone, a reminder that divinity doesn't always wear gold. This satyr? He believes the latter. He raises the aulos to his lips, plays a few low, haunting notes. Not a performance. More like a whisper to the past. It's flawed. Wobbly. Beautiful. You realize this is the music Marsyas might have played, music that didn't care about perfection, only connection, and suddenly, you understand the real tragedy. It wasn't that he lost. It's that the gods were never listening, they were judging, and in that tiny, trembling shift, legends are born. The forest falls away behind you like the last note of a song, and you're walking again, barefoot, for some reason. The moss beneath your feet feels like velvet soaked in old stories, and every step sounds like a soft apology. The trees grow sparser here. The air cooler. The mood quieter. Your path curls toward a hillside crowned with olive trees, knotted, ancient, and dignified in that way only things with deep roots and longer memories can be. As you climb, your ears catch something new, not music, exactly, but conversation, gentle voices, low and murmuring, like scholars debating after too much honeyed wine. You crest the hill and find them, 3 philosophers gathered around a fireless hearth. No flames, no warmth, but they sit close, cloaks drawn around them like ideas they're still not quite sure about. They're sipping from shallow cups and arguing, politely, sleepily, and with the kind of intensity only reserved for debates that cannot, by design, be won. They notice you. Gesture for you to join. One of them, let's call him Plausibides, leans in and says, "We're discussing the lesson of Marsyas." "Of course you are," you settle in. Another, perhaps Allegoros, sips from his cup and says, "He represents hubris. A mortal challenging a god. Classic case. Textbook." The third, Cymbeline, waves a dismissive hand. "No, no, no. That's reductive. He's the voice of the marginalized. Silenced by systemic divine elitism." Plausibides snorts. Systemic? Don't start sounding modern. These myths weren't political, Cymbeline glares. Everything's political. And there it is, even among the ancient thinkers of myth, the story of Marsyas remains a source of division. A mirror reflecting back whatever discomfort you're most unwilling to confront. They continue to argue, softly. Plausibides insists Marsyas is punished for insolence. He should have known better. You don't step onto a god's stage and expect mercy. Allegoros counters that Apollo cheated. That the contest was corrupted. Marsyas didn't lose on talent, he lost to a stacked deck. Cymbeline argues that the entire framework is flawed. Why are mortals expected to obey beauty instead of define it? Historians still argue whether the myth was created to reinforce divine hierarchy or to question it. Some claim it was a morality tale for musicians, don't play too boldly. Others think it was whispered by those who had no temples, no statues, just stories passed between rebels by candlelight. You listen, one of them brings up a curious detail, the idea that the myth might have been born in Phrygia, not Greece. That Marsyas was originally a local river spirit or shamanic figure, swallowed by the rising tide of Hellenic storytelling. His challenge to Apollo might not have been arrogance, but cultural defiance, a wild god refusing assimilation. You blink. That's new, not in the mythbooks you read in middle school, but it makes sense. History loves to sand off the sharp edges, doesn't it? Turn real rebellion into poetic caution. Maybe Marsyas was louder than the stories say. Maybe he wasn't just a goat-legged flute player. Maybe he was a reminder that music and magic and meaning don't belong only to Olympus. Sometimes they belong to the muddy rivers, to the wind, to whoever dares to play. The philosophers lapse into silence, each steeped in their own thoughts. You ask what happened after. They glance at each other, then Cymbeline speaks. Some say Apollo regretted it. That's surprising, he nods. Not in public. Of course. Not officially. But there are whispers in later myths. That he grew quieter. Sadder. That he started playing more mournful tunes. Plausibides mutters, revisionist. But Cymbeline continues, think about it. He won, but no one celebrated. Even gods aren't immune to the echo of cruelty. Especially when the echo comes in the form of a river that sounds like crying. You shiver, and Allegoros adds, there are fragments, fringe, yes, that suggest Apollo's lyre changed after Marsyas. That he retuned it. That he added a lower register. As if, even in victory, he felt the need to make room for grief. You can't decide if that's redemption or guilt with good branding, but either way. It lingers, you thank them. Rise to go, Cymbeline leans forward as you leave. Remember, he says softly, not every myth is a warning. some are questions disguised as answers. You nod, descend the hill, and now the night air feels heavier with meaning. You're walking through more than forest now. You're walking through unresolved tension, through debates that never truly sleep. Your ears ring, not with music, but with potential. Notes unplayed. Songs unsung. You wonder, how many Marsyas walk the world, flutes in hand, unaware that their truth will be measured not by how well they play, but by who's listening. You don't have an answer, but the hill fades behind you, and the ground ahead is soft. And somewhere in the trees, you hear the whisper of a river, still flowing, still mourning, still singing. By now, you're starting to suspect that no myth ever truly ends, they just shift locations, and sure enough, as you walk deeper into the folds of this dusky dreamscape, the forest opens into something else, something not quite real, but rooted enough to trick your senses. A grove. Columns. Marble gone mossy. Vines winding like time itself. The architecture here is more suggestion than structure. Half a roof. Half a wall. One full pedestal, but no statue, a shrine, but this one is different from the quiet altar at the beginning of your journey. It's not mourning Marsyas. It's not worshipping Apollo, it's both, and neither, carved into one of the walls, half erased by centuries of wind and whatever poetic decay does to history. Is a strange image. You squint. It's a satyr, not flayed, not screaming, but standing. Proud. Alive. Allos at his lips, and above him, not in judgment, but in harmony, is Apollo, lyre in hand, both playing, together. You blink again. The image shimmers, as though unsure whether it's real, or just your exhausted imagination scribbling over stone, but the idea. The idea holds, because here's the thing, some versions of the myth, obscure, neglected, passed over in classrooms and casual conversations, don't end in flaying, they end in fusion, a theory historians occasionally whisper around symposiums like an unpopular opinion at a dinner party, that the contest between Marsyas and Apollo wasn't about victory. It was a metaphor for musical evolution. For synthesis, not destruction. One French scholar even wrote that the flaying was symbolic, representing Apollo stripping Marsyas of his outer identity to absorb the essence of his music into something higher. Now, whether that's brilliant or a desperate retcon, you decide, but the image sticks with you, a duet, not a duel, and in that lens, the story transforms again. You take a seat on a broken column and try to imagine the sound, Apollo's clear, celestial tones, precise, like glass catching sunlight. Marsyas' earthy, breath-warmed notes, rougher, yes, but honest. Together, they'd be discordant at first. Clashing. Jarring. But then, slowly, something would align, a harmony no one expected, because art doesn't evolve through echo. It evolves through tension. That might be the lesson Apollo learned too late, or never did. Or maybe, just maybe, he did learn it, and passed it down quietly through melodies that softened over centuries. There's an old coin, yes, a real one, found in Dinar, ancient Apamea, believed to show Marsyas standing proudly with his Allos. No chains. No wounds. Just music. You imagine the mint master at the time. Did he know what that coin would mean centuries later? Did he care, or was he just honoring the spirit of rebellion? Of sound over silence, historians still argue whether that image was state-approved propaganda or a quiet act of cultural defiance. Either way, it exists. Bronze proof that someone, somewhere, wanted Marsyas to be remembered whole. You shift on your column seat. The stone is warm now. Or maybe you are. The air carries the smell of crushed olives and something metallic, like memory, and then, as if summoned by thought alone, a whisper in the wind. Would you like to hear it? You freeze, the voice is behind you. Impossible to place. Young and old, soft and sharp, male and female, or neither. All at once, you turn, and standing there, right where the shadow of the old statue might have fallen, is a figure, tall. Barefoot. Wearing a tunic that shifts between gold and rust depending on how the light hits it. Hair like sunbeams in motion. Eyes like full moons caught in amber, Apollo, or some dream of him. He raises the lyre, not threatening, not triumphant. Just curious, you nod, he plucks a string, the sound is impossible, it's both, crisp and raw. Heavenly and haunted. Each note seems to hold a question and its answer, folded together like prayer origami. The melodies twist, flirt, collide. They don't blend, not exactly, but they respect each other, and then, God's help you hear it, a second instrument, behind you. Breathy. Nasal. Earthy, alas, you turn again, and there's Marsyas, also not quite real. Also very real. His eyes gleam, not with anger, not with grief, but something fiercer. Joy, and now they're playing together, a duet, right here, right now, your breath catches. You forget the myths. Forget the flaying. Forget who won, who lost, because there's no competition here, only creation. This is what the myth could have been. What it might still become, if we let it. A reminder that beauty isn't singular. That divine doesn't always mean better. That two truths can exist in the same stanza, even if they refuse to rhyme. You sit in silence, not because you're afraid to speak, but because anything you say would feel like interruption. Eventually, the music fades, the gods vanish, or maybe they were never there, only the story was. You rise. Step forward. Touch the broken pedestal, it's warm now, or maybe you turn back to the path, still barefoot, still dreaming, and now, carrying a tune you can't quite hum, but will never forget. You're walking again, and this time the path leads downward, not dramatically, just a slow, spiraling descent like a record turning beneath a needle. Your footsteps are silent, swallowed by soft ground and softer shadows. Every so often, you hear a note. Just one. Then nothing. Then another. It's like the forest is tuning itself. Ahead, there's a clearing, and in its center, a circle of low stones. Not grand enough to be a temple. Not solemn enough to be a grave. Just a circle. You step in without thinking. The air changes, you're not alone, they arrive in twos and threes. Not gods. Not mortals. Something in between. They have the timeless quality of stories you half remember. Some wear ivy crowns. Others, sun-bleached cloaks. None speak. But they sit. Quiet. Waiting, then, without ceremony, one of them begins to play, not an aulos. Not a lyre. Something else, an instrument you've never seen. It looks like a shell and sounds like a question. Another joins in. Then another. The melody builds slowly, like mist gathering on a lake. You realize what this is, a memorial, but not for a death, for a transformation, because here's the truth, myths don't stay dead. They change shape. Marsyas may have lost his skin, but he didn't lose his song. And you're hearing it now, not from Olympus, not from dusty scrolls, but from these wild, nameless players who've carried his legacy without ever needing to say his name. They're the children of dissonance. The ones who keep the story alive, not by repeating it, but by rewriting it. Historians still argue whether this myth was meant to warn or inspire. But out here, in this circle, you understand, it was meant to survive, and it has, just not in the way the gods expected. There's a young satyr among them, barely more than a child. Curly hair. Wide eyes. He's not playing, just listening, flute resting in his lap. You watch him carefully. When the music ends, he looks at you. They told me never to play too loud, he whispers. That the gods don't like it. You crouch beside him, play anyway, you say. He smiles, and begins. It's rough. Uneven. Brave. A melody with knees scraped from running through the underbrush of doubt. But it's alive. And that's what matters. You listen as the others join in again, tentative, then bolder. The circle becomes a chorus. You're no longer audience, no longer separate. The rhythm pulls at your bones, so you hum, softly at first, then louder, and no lightning strikes, no wrath descends, because out here, away from Olympus and its delicate egos, the only rule is to keep the music going, even when you're scared, especially then. One of the older satyrs mentioned something, half a joke, half a truth, that in some older local Phrygian variants, Marsyas wasn't flayed at all. He simply walked into a river and disappeared. That river, they say, still runs beneath the mountains, whispering songs that no one dares write down. You ask if it's real, he just shrugs. Everything's real if you hear it. And you do, you hear the ripple. The breath between notes. The heartbeat beneath the melody. You sit down again, let it wash over you. One of the players offers you an instrument, something stringed, fragile looking, with pegs like curled horns. You hesitate. You're not a musician, they shrug. Doesn't matter. And somehow, it doesn't. You pluck one note, just one, it echoes like a memory you haven't lived yet, and they nod, you're part of it now. This isn't about mastery. It never was. That was Apollo's mistake, thinking perfection was the point. But music, like myth, is about motion. Expression. Vulnerability. A willingness to be heard, even if your voice cracks in the middle, especially if it cracks, so you keep playing, long into the night. The satyr child has fallen asleep, flute tucked beneath his chin like a lullaby that's found a place to rest. Others drift off, too, leaning against each other like notes in a chord that only resolves in silence, and still, the music hums, quiet now, not gone, just softer, waiting, like the story itself. Waiting for the next player, the next listener, the next night when someone will wonder why a god ever feared a flute. You rise quietly, leaving the circle behind. No one stirs. The music has settled into their sleep like a blanket, woven through dreams. Your feet tread gently, so as not to wake the silence. But something draws you forward, something old, older than Apollo, older even than myth. The trees thin, and the moon stretches wide above a valley. In the distance, you see it, a stone bridge arcing over a trickling stream. It's narrow, crooked, utterly unremarkable. And somehow, exactly where you're meant to go, as you step onto the bridge, the air sharpens. Cold, but not unfriendly. It smells like rain that hasn't fallen yet. This, you sense, is the crossing point, not death, not life. Just the shift, the place where stories shed their skins. You sit on the bridge's edge, legs dangling. Beneath, the water whispers to itself in a language without consonants. You listen. And then you remember, the river Marsyas. Real, not metaphorical. Still flowing through Phrygia to this day. They named it for him, or maybe he became it. The locals believe you can still hear his music in its eddies if you close your eyes. You do, and maybe it's the wind, or your own exhaustion, but there it is again, that haunting, breathy melody, soft as mist, persistent as memory. Historians still argue whether the river's name predates the myth or was added after. Some say it's proof the story is based on a real person. A musician who challenged authority and paid a terrible price. Others believe the myth came first, and the geography bent to accommodate it, names conforming to narrative like clay in mythic hands. Does it matter? You're here now, and the water knows. You pull a stone from your pocket, smooth, heavy, warm from your palm. One of the musicians handed it to you without a word before you left. You hadn't thought to ask why. But now, instinctively, you drop it into the stream, plunk, a soft splash. A tiny ripple. The sound disappears into the larger hush. Somewhere behind you, a nightbird calls, another joins it, and soon, the whole valley feels alive with those layered notes. Nocturnal. Distant. Yet entirely aware of your presence. They're not watching, they're remembering, and you are now part of that memory. You stretch out on the bridge, stone beneath your spine, sky above your eyes. The stars here don't twinkle. They burn steady. Like punctuation marks in a cosmic lullaby, you think about Apollo again, and Marsyas, and the absurdity of it all, that an eternal God would care what a satyr played. That music, something as fleeting and formless as breath, could start wars in heaven. That beauty needs a winner, but maybe that's the trick. Maybe that's why this myth has lasted, because it doesn't settle, it doesn't give you peace, it leaves you wondering. It leaves room, and in that space, between the notes, beneath the skin, behind the arrogance and agony, there's a question humming gently: who decides what's divine? Your breathing slows, the bridge feels softer now, almost like it's lifting. You wonder, just briefly, if you'll wake in your own bed, remembering none of this, or if the story has taken root inside you, winding around your spine like ivy. The stream below babbles on. You start to hum again. You don't know the tune. Maybe no one does, but it fits. You close your eyes, and for a long while, there is nothing but the slow movement of water, the occasional sigh of wind, and your own voice, threading itself into the night like a final stanza. Not because you're trying to be remembered, but because something in you still believes in the power of song. When you wake, if this even counts as waking, it's with dew on your face and a faint ache in your back. The bridge beneath you feels less like stone now, more like a memory pretending to be architecture. You sit up slowly. The sky is soft gray, the kind that stretches between night and dawn without making a big fuss about it, and there's someone sitting across from you. You blink once. Twice. It's him, not Apollo. Not Marsyas. But the same old man from the tavern, remember him? Back in section 3. The one who wouldn't speak, who just stared at his drink like it owed him answers. He's here now. Not young. Not divine. Just present. He's carving something. A small wooden pipe. Not an aulos exactly, more like a child's flute. His fingers are slow but precise. You watch in silence, not daring to speak. After a while, he says, without looking up, I taught him. You say nothing, but your breath stills. He smiles, faintly. Not the notes. The defiance. And there it is, the origin, because every myth has one. Even if history tries to scrape it away. I told him the gods would hate it, the old man continues. Told him they like their music clean. Predictable. Civilized. He looks up now, eyes crinkled at the corners like old sheet music, but he didn't listen. There's pride in his voice. And grief. And something else, a softness that rarely survives this long in a man who's seen centuries. Do you regret it? You ask, he snorts. Regret? No. Not that. He finishes the flute, tests a note. It squeaks, wild and perfect. He hands it to you, you hesitate, you think I can play? You already are, he says, standing. You just don't know the tune yet. And then he walks off the bridge, disappearing into the soft fog without so much as a goodbye. You sit with the flute, it's light. Unfinished. Splintered in places, but you raise it to your lips, and try. It sounds awful, but also honest, and maybe that's the point. You look out at the water again. It's brighter now. The river reflecting clouds like old marble polished with sunlight. Somewhere upstream, someone else might be playing. Downstream, someone might be listening. Music travels like that. You walk off the bridge, flute in hand, and the world begins to shift again. Now the ground beneath you feels sandy. The trees become sparse. Shrubs give way to cracked earth and low stones. You've entered a new terrain. Dry, bright, unforgiving, Phrygia, real Phrygia, or some version of it, stitched together from history, dream, and whatever's left in your head at this hour of night. And there it is, the spot, a hollow grove. The very place where the contest was said to occur. There's no plaque. No monument. Just wind. And silence, but you kneel anyway. You touch the earth, it's warm, and you can feel it. Not blood. Not bones, something deeper, the echo, like the whole ground is a drum that never stopped resonating with that impossible battle between man and God, music and might, breath and string, historians still argue whether this site was ever real. Whether it's just local lore superimposed on random geography. But you're not here to prove anything, you're here to listen, and maybe forgive, because there's one part of the story no one talks about. What happened after Apollo walked away? Did he feel triumph, or did he feel shame? Did the notes stick in his throat the next time he played? Maybe he came back here, centuries later. Maybe he stood where you're standing, staring at the dirt and whispering an apology too late to be heard, or maybe not, but still, you whisper one now, for Marsyas, for Apollo, for the price of beauty, and the cost of defiance. The wind shifts, and you think, no, you know, someone hears it, the earth beneath your knees hums. Just a little, like it approves, or remembers, or both. You rise, brush the dust from your legs, and look out over the cracked horizon. It's endless. Not because it leads anywhere in particular, but because the story does. Even now, especially now, you take out the flute, try one more note. This time, it's better, still not good, but it carries, and that's enough. You follow the dry path as it winds through low hills. The sun now hangs low and buttery, painting everything in sleepy gold. This is the hour where shadows grow long and your thoughts get strange. You're still holding the flute. It feels heavier now, like it knows how many centuries it's carrying. There's a stone bench ahead, too symmetrical to be natural, too weathered to be modern. You sit, and for the first time in what feels like hours or centuries, you let yourself breathe, deeply. No divine music contest, no flaying, no gods judging your every move, just you, and the ghost of a song. You begin to wonder why this myth stuck. Why this one, among the thousands, keeps appearing in textbooks and tavern murals and dreamlike bedtime journeys. Maybe because it's not about gods and monsters, maybe because it's about something closer to home, that old fear: what if I speak up and get punished for it? What if I'm right and still lose? What if beauty isn't enough to save me? There's comfort in knowing Marsyas asked those questions too. Even if he didn't survive them, or maybe he did. In the way people do when their story lingers longer than their body. The bench overlooks a plain now dotted with olive trees. You realize they weren't there before. The landscape is rewriting itself as you reflect. This is how myths behave when you're not looking. They change, softly, and they change you. Suddenly, you feel it, an urge to speak the story out loud. Not read it. Not whisper it. Tell it. Like people once did, around fires, under stars. You begin slowly. He was a satyr. Not a king. Not a god. Just a creature who loved the sound of breath through wood. You speak like you're tracing the tale into the air, and he found a flute, left by a goddess who didn't want her own reflection distorted. The wind picks up, gentle, like applause without hands, and he played it. And played it. And played it. Pause, and a god heard him. And instead of joining in, the god declared war. You stop there, the wind stills, because maybe that's the part we all need to sit with, that when someone dares to express themselves, those in power might not celebrate it. They might feel threatened. Might try to control the narrative. Might demand a contest they've already rigged, and yet, people still play, still sing, still write, still speak, even when their hands tremble, even when the outcome is certain, even when the price is skin. You stand again. The path now forks. One way leads toward the mountain. A harsh climb, rocks sharp and shadows long. The other trails into a grove with no visible exit. You hesitate, and then remember what Marsyas probably didn't know: you don't have to choose between divinity and defiance, you can walk your own direction. So you step off the path entirely. The ground gives slightly beneath your feet. Like it wasn't expecting you to be so stubborn. But it makes room, because when you refuse the binary, the world reshapes to accommodate you. Your walk becomes easier. Softer. The trees don't crowd you. They accompany you. A bird sings overhead. Not beautifully, but with gusto. Unapologetically off-key. You grin. A clearing opens. In it, a statue. Worn almost to featurelessness, but the inscription is clear: to those who sang without permission. You sit beside it, not in reverence, in solidarity. You don't need to worship Marsyas, just understand him, and maybe, when the world tells you your music is too strange, your story too messy, your voice too much, you'll remember this moment. And play anyway, because the melody lives on, not in marble, not in myths, but in you. You don't know how long you sit beside the statue. Time has become elastic, stretching out like honey on warm bread. The birds have quieted. The light has taken on that silvery softness just before twilight folds itself into night. And the flute, that strange little fragment of a past you never lived, rests across your lap like it belongs there. You trace your fingers along its grain. There are no divine signatures, no symbols of favor, just wood, and breath, and the faint imprint of someone else's longing. You look around. The clearing has filled, not with people, but with presence. Figures sit quietly at the edge of the grove. They're not detailed. More like outlines. Silhouettes made of old stories and half-remembered dreams. Some pluck lyres. Some hum tunes with no names. A few are entirely still, listening, and you add your own breath to the chorus. Not a song, not a masterpiece, just sound, honest and unsure, and something stirs in the leaves. Maybe the god has returned, maybe it's just the wind. Either way, you don't stop, because the story isn't over, because no one gets to end it for you. Somewhere across the grove, one of the figures begins to play too. It's not Apollo. And it's not Marsyas. Just someone else, alive with the same quiet defiance, a woman in a modern hoodie, a child with sandals and wings drawn on their backpack. A man whose face is lined with every decade he survived, all playing, together, and none of them trying to win. There's no audience. No judges. No prize, just sound, moving through the trees like smoke from an ancient hearth. You laugh softly. So this is how myths should end, not with agony, but with community, with songs no god can punish, with a quiet kind of resistance that doesn't need a name. Historians still argue whether Apollo regretted what he did. Whether the contest haunted him through temples and sunlit sanctuaries. Whether he ever looked into the eyes of another musician without seeing Marsyas staring back. There's no evidence, of course, but you like to think so. Because even gods, for all their control and pride, aren't immune to the ache of remorse. You look up at the sky, stars blink into existence like old friends returning, and something in your chest loosens. Not relief, not victory, just recognition. You stand, leaving the flute resting against the statue's base. You won't need it anymore. Others will find it, others will play, and the story will keep reshaping itself in their hands, their mouths, their ears. You step back into the woods, the night folds around you like a velvet curtain, and the last note echoes long after your feet have disappeared into shadow, and now, slowly, gently, you feel yourself easing away from the myth. Like a boat untying itself from a fog-covered dock. The wind that once carried song now barely rustles the leaves above you. Your breathing softens. Your thoughts loosen their grip. The grove is far behind. The god and the satyr, two figures once bursting with rage and melody, have faded into the hush of history. All that remains is the faint echo of something meaningful, something unfinished, something true. Your body is still. Heavy, but not burdened. You are not running anymore. You are not watching contests or crossing bridges. You are simply resting. Let that feeling grow. Imagine the air around you wrapping you up, not tightly, but just enough. Just enough to say, you're safe now. The danger has passed. The story has softened its edges. The stars are high. The night is deep. The earth has nothing more to ask of you, and maybe, just maybe, the song that once stirred gods to anger now hums only for your peace. Let it drift into your thoughts like mist, let it quiet the last stubborn noise in your mind, and when sleep comes, when it finally does, it won't arrive like a judge or a punishment. It will come like a friend, settling beside you. No contest, no cruelty, just calm, and silence, and dreams.